which was just a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I met Julie when she was teaching at the Montessori school here in Winston-Salem, and I was interested in teaching. And she was also pregnant with her oldest child, who now has been away from the home for quite a while. But I wanted to tell you that Julie, when she was getting her master's in counseling, first encountered the Enneagram, and then it came back into her life about 7 years ago. And so she's found it useful for work and for personal life and with friends. And at first, knowing Julie, because Julie kind of devours books. So first it was books and podcasts, and then she attended workshops, both close in Durham, farther away in Cincinnati and San Francisco. And now she is getting her certification through the Narrative Enneagram. And besides the Master's in Counseling, which is where she first heard about the Enneagram, which was at UNC Charlotte, she has a BA in Early Childhood Education from Furman and an Early Childhood Certification from the American Montessori Society. And she's been working with children in classroom situation for 36 years, which has included as a teacher, it has included as an admissions director, curriculum coordinator, parent educator, and school head. And she's also interested in yoga and mindfulness in schools and enjoys time with her family. And she, along with 3 other Montessorians, we started the Salem Montessori School in her living room, oh so long ago. And who would have known that it would have been at Home Moravian, and that she would be in charge of it, and that I would be in charge of the church working with it. So it's been a fun journey. And so, Julie, I am going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Margaret. That's much more probably than you wanted to know, but it is fascinating that who knew when I sat in the basement of the Methodist Church on Bolton Street and was part of hiring Margaret that we would be together many 30-something years later. But we did have fun sitting in my basement, and Margaret was the music teacher when we had just 8 little children coming to my house 3 days a week for the very first Salem Montessori, never dreaming that it would catch on and go on. So it's been lovely to be back at Salem Montessori and reconnect with Margaret. And Montessori is a way of thinking. And so I think that makes it lovely when Margaret and I collaborate, that we're sort of on the same wavelength. So some of you I know pretty well, some of you I don't know at all, some of you I miss seeing around the church, something as simple as collecting mail. But today my understanding is that we want to meet till around noon. Is that right? Yeah. And so today, I hope doesn't disappoint, but I'm going to try to give you a sort of a Enneagram, what, so what, now what? And, not knowing why all of you are here, my intention is to whet your appetite to join us 9 more times to go through each number of the Enneagram. So I'm just curious, you can just do a thumbs up or a thumbs down. How many of you are familiar with the Enneagram at all? Have seen it? Okay. And then how many of you that are, have a video going, how many of you think you might know your number or any way that you personally interact with the Enneagram? Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So not too many. So today I'm going to practice sharing my screen. I taught a class every week this summer about the Enneagram on Zoom. So I learned a little bit, and I found that, first of all, I apologize for having to listen to me for so long. It's harder to draw in. We have about a nice sized crowd to get you to, weigh in and answer some questions. I also found that while slides, if we were at church, are helpful, it gets old. I think it's better looking at each other than nothing. So I do have some slides and I'm going to share them, but I'm going to try not to keep them up too long, because I found that, once you've seen a picture of the cross, you've kind of seen it and you don't want to look at it for 5 minutes. So let me see if I can get it on screen share. Am I doing that? Yeah. Okay. So I just, I have this picture of the cross that I use when it's sort of my greatest joy to be able to do this in a Christian setting. And we're going to sort of circle around that this morning of what is this Enneagram and why would the church want to teach it? And I just want you thinking a little bit about, you have a story, and I'm grateful. I see most of us on this call are, probably over 30. And most people that are highly expert in the Enneagram, I mean, I would consider myself like an Enneagram infant, but a lot of people think you can't really understand your type and your number until you're about 30. And I think that's fascinating because obviously I do a lot of work with parents and have been diving into the Enneagram with them. And guess what parents want to do? They want to type their children. And really the typing of oneself, especially here because we're in a sacred context, is sacred work. And so it's very important for people to be telling their story. Sort of, you all have a rich story with the history of the Moravians, and you're sort of rooted right in it. So it's front and center, and not every denomination has that privilege of that type of history. But we all have personal stories. The Bible is in general the story of God reaching down to his people and drawing a people unto himself that is the kingdom now and points us to a kingdom that will come. So for this purpose, you're going to hear me a lot talking about the Enneagram in a spiritual context. If you go to training or more secular things, you're going to hear a lot about it's a psycho-spiritual tool for healthy people. So it's the meeting of sort of psychology with a way to go deeper. And so a lot of times people ask me the question, well, I've done Myers-Briggs, or I've done Strength Finders, or I've done whatever. And so that's the same as the Enneagram, right? And my answer is not really. So I first began using the Enneagram on a leadership team that I was on, and we were trying to build community. And, any of you that have ever tried to go to someone and say, hey, what you said really hurt my feelings or rubbed me the wrong way, that at least when people say that to me, that's a really hard start. So the Enneagram became a way for us to describe our behavior. And it's fine. You're going to see it a lot right now used in leadership. And I call that kind of a horizontal use. Like, Margaret and I are on a leadership team at a school, and we've got to work together. And now we know our type. So that gives us some language to approach each other and say, I know this is how you operate. So most of you all probably have heard of the Myers-Briggs. I had a teacher at a different school who was an introvert. I gave the Myers-Briggs to all my teachers. I've done that at almost every school I've been in. And if I knew the teacher was an introvert and she'd been teaching all day and I had things we need to talk about, do you think it was really smart to go see her at 3:30 right after the kids walked out? She was kind of like, please stop talking to me. Don't talk to me. So I want to encourage you that you're going to hear a lot about it. And I feel a little possessive of the Enneagram. You're going to hear a lot about it out in the culture. And that's fine. But we hear, and, even with 9 Sundays, which some of you may be thinking, oh my God, that's so mind numbing. Can we just get on with it? But even with 9 Sundays, we're going to be kind of surface dwelling. And so my goal for these 9 weeks is their 9 numbers, and for you to have an understanding first of your type and how you inhabit the number that you lead with, but also to have enough information about the 9 other types. And then a next level class would be taking that deeper. So, if we have a pretty stable group, it'll be easier to go a little bit deeper and sort of identify with your questions. So we'll just kind of see how that goes. How does that sound? Okay. Just 1 minute, the history. So it's kind of a mystery, which I kind of like. There's all kinds of talk and theories about where it came from. And I'm just going to tell you, we don't really care where it came from. It's here and it's highly useful. And if you let it open up your heart, it will draw you closer to God, and it will draw you closer to your core self, where you really are truly made in the image of God and a child of God. And I don't think that's what the Myers-Briggs and Gallup Strength Finders are trying to do. I think they're just trying to help you know your ego self this is designed to take you a little bit deeper. It sort of, a lot of people think it's 2,000 years old, but it became wandering back into the United States in about the 30s, and then got really more popularized in the 70s. And then in the last 10 years, for whatever reason, it's just like someone kind of poured kerosene on it. So we're going to shift now in a second and look a little bit at the symbol. And I like to think of it as a map. And the other thing I like about our call, I mean, I can't see everyone on the phone, but I'm assuming no one's 15, that all of us at some point used to take a map. Remember that when you used to go on a road trip and you had an atlas, and one person possibly in the car would be reading the map and the other person would be driving? Do y'all remember that? Well, there's more than one way to get to Raleigh from Winston-Salem, right? And you're going to get there. They're just different routes. And so to me, the Enneagram is a map of 9 different ways to open up our lives to the sacred and divine power. And we're going to go about it very differently. And this is just a fun fact I learned this week. So I have this ridiculous nerdy habit of my commute to work is slightly longer working at Salem Montessori than it was. So I have a podcast today. And I listened a lot to the Enneagram because I'm such a knowledge nerd. But they studied infants, and I can get the name. Margaret, would it be possible for me to send a link with a few resources after this to you? And this, okay. So some, I don't know, PhD types studied infant temperament in a hospital. This was about 20 years ago. And guess how many types of temperament they found? They found 9. And there are 9 types of the Enneagram. So I thought, wow, I love it when things connect and converge. So before I start in with the symbol, does anyone want to unmute? I can't unmute you, but and have a question or something that they need clarification, or just something that they want the group to hear before we go diving into the next part of this? You all are so well trained to be on mute. Okay. Well, keep thinking, because at some point I'm going to want your feedback, because being a good Montessori teacher, everyone's like, what's Montessori? And I'm like, oh my God, do you want the cocktail version? I might be interested in sitting my child there version, or I might get a PhD version. But a simple version is Montessori uses the power of observation to plan a course of instruction. So as a good Montessorian, I will be watching and listening for your reactions to see how I might take you through a map that could take us 9 years instead of 9 weeks. So that's a good little Montessori in the nutshell. So I'm going to go back, since nothing. Okay, I'll take that to mean you're happy. Here we go, back to my little share. And I'm going to show you this first. This is a little bit of a trick, but the Enneagram is a circle. And I think a lot of you may have seen, but I show you this circle first because this isn't really the Enneagram. This is just a circle. And before I start putting in numbers and lines and all this really exciting stuff, the Enneagram teaches at its core for you to pause and check in. And it's about a circle brings you to union. So this image, it has a very different feel. If we put 9 personality points and 9 ways of being across a line, that feels very different than a circle. And I just start with that because I'm assuming we're all here to learn about ourselves, but also, especially in this time of COVID, which I'm not even going to touch on. I think we've all talked about it, and here it is. I don't have a lot to say about it, except it's a little tricky to run a school in COVID, but it seems to be working fine. But a circle is about union. And at its core, no matter what number you learn or discover that you lead with and that you identify with the most, we're all in this together. And I believe that if we want to see the kingdom of God on earth, it's about union, and a circle displays that better than any symbol. And so it's not to say, well, Margaret, you're a 4 and you do this, and I'm a 6 and I do that, and that's that. It's like, no. How do all of the numbers make us truly the community of God? And that the goal is union of a deeper connection to each other, which I think is a deeper connection to our sacred community. And I believe we'll be together. We're having an election, in case you haven't heard. It's kind of like we have a pandemic, we have an election, probably heard of all those things. I believe that the circle and the union and the self-discovery is more important than how we cast our ballot or how we vote. Not to minimize that, but I believe that the union that we desire starts with ourselves. And no matter what I do or who runs for president or governor or whatever, at some point we have to learn to truly love and let people with very different views into the circle with us. And for me, the Enneagram has allowed me to stop the narration from my point of view and allow that there are always going to be people that think, and wow, I wonder what God makes of that. And I don't know what God makes of that, but the closer we move toward that, I believe that the union will help us all go together. So with that, I'm going to mix it up a little bit. And being a good teacher, I like discovery. So here's another image, and I can't see all of you, but I'm sure someone knows what this is. If you want to unmute yourself, you can say what this is. So it's actually the Enneagram symbol, but not with numbers. So I wanted you to see this because the Enneagram teaches us to pause and pay attention. And so when you start going right with the symbol, people immediately start, well, what do those lines mean? And where's my number? And what if I'm this number? And what about the number next to me? So I'm taking you through it in kind of an unconventional way to get you where I want you to go, which is looking at the symbol today, which is this. So this has a little bit more information on it. And you see the 9 numbers. And you notice that at the top is number 9. And then as you go around the circle, you see type 1, the perfectionist, type 2, the helper, type 3, the performer, which is also in some traditions known as the achiever, type 4, the romantic, type 5, the investigator, type 6, the loyalist, type 7, the enthusiast, type 8, the challenger, and type 9, the peacemaker. So this image, I believe Mark Wright took it, and I think it's on your website, but I will make sure that you get this back. And before I get us off the slides, I want you to look at this. You know why you can't know someone's type? Because it's how you're acting on the inside. It's your inner voice. And it's your first go-to strategy, reaction, first thought when events occur. It's your first line of narration, but it may not be what you say on the outside. And so that's why I consider this such sacred work. And on any given day, the self and the personality and the ego self that I'm presenting might not be what I'm thinking. And so it's not right for me to, look at Barbara Strauss and say, oh, well, you're acting like a 7 and enthusiastic and all, when she might be thinking, no, that's not what I'm saying inside. And so I think we all on this call know we have 2 selves, right? We have the self that we put forth and the inner self. But what I really like is that this gives us a lexicon or a language to open up a little more easily. And we're going to learn as we go around the circle that different types open up about different things, right? We all have things that, you've heard people say, well, it's really hard for me to talk about how I feel, or, my go-to for stress is I have to get it in my body. And the Enneagram is going to kind of show us how different types respond to different things. So I'd love to see if you have a question within all the just blah, blah, blah that I've just said, or a comment. Often people have a thought or a statement about what's been shared. Does this sort of line up with what you have imagined about the Enneagram? I saw a couple of you. I think it was the Drakes that know their type. So y'all are welcome to weigh in. If you've done some study, by all means, you might know more about it than I do, but please share.
Our son introduced us to the book The Road Back to You.
Okay.
Enneagram version. And
So that's Susan. Yeah, that's Susan Stabile and E.O. Michael Cronin. And I got to go to Duke and hear Susan Stabile. And I'll put up, she has a podcast. And what drew your interest into it? In other words, you know, of course, you're a child. So there's that. Oh, thank you. I love show and tell. There's the book.
There's the book.
The Road Back to You. And
Not
I'll put
really
a
long.
Yeah.
well, the book was recommended to him, of course, and he was struggling with his who are you? You know, who is he? And and he knew we were kind of interested in the same thing over the years, so he recommended it to us, and he may have even sent it to me. So reading it, I did find it fascinating and interesting right from the start. And I'll just say that I started reading it and I said, oh my goodness, this is me. This is me. I can't believe it. And I read the next one and I said, no, this is me. And I didn't go much farther. And I said, you know, I think I know who I am. And my son said, no, we think you're this number. That was the true number, basically, because he knew my personality type for many years. So so it was an interesting start and fascinating to go ahead and read the book and learn all the personality types.
So you point to something interesting in that to prepare you, which has something to do with my number, I very much like to be prepared, is if you see a type and you think, I want to be a peacemaker, I'm sure I'm the peacemaker, or I love the idea of being a helper, it's probably not your number. There's a little bit of a sort of and one of the gifts of adult children is they tell you the truth. Right? They know you, they've seen you. You can't hide from your children. I mean, maybe when they're little, but I would suggest even little children know a lot more than we give them credit for. We can learn a lot from them. So there's a little bit of one of the institutes, it's not who I'm training through, it's called Enneagram Institute in New York, has something called the Ennea Thought. And you can sign up for 2 numbers and they come to your inbox every morning. Mm-hmm. And so I get my number and the number next to mine. And not every time, but I'd say 8 times out of 10, when I read my number's thought of the day, I'm like, oh, that's so true. You know, it just brings me in. But I'd love, do you go by Ted? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, Ted. And what's your wife's name? I assume that's your wife or your
Debbie. I'm Debbie.
Debbie. What did it do for your relationship with your son?
Well, he lives far out of town, and so we couldn't connect about it as much as maybe we should have. As a matter of fact, he went on to other things, and I don't know if he knows his own number yet at this point. Or he knows it and won't tell me. So that's possible. But I can't say we went any further with it on that. We're going on to other things because of distance, you might say.
Yeah, I understand.
Relationship.
Well, I'm going to give you some thoughts and an opportunity. Betsy, I think maybe you wanted to say something. Is that true?
No, she said Betsy.
I can't remember. I think it was in the 80s. I was a psychotherapist and later I was a business consultant. And so and I don't remember, and this is, I don't remember anything, but I had no recollection it being anything around spirituality. And maybe it went through different phases when they emphasized different things, but we just did it along with, I mean, there must be a dozen well-used personality things.
I think you're right. Yeah.
What I remember in the 80s was starting with Myers-Briggs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what that helped me the most with was understanding people who had trouble with me.
Yeah.
You know, I would get something negative and I would be floored. Mm-hmm. And then I could look it up and see how it was part of that personality. Mm-hmm. And so it didn't feel as personal.
Correct. That's beautifully said.
Yeah. And then it also helped me to try to be more flexible and getting into the communication is not what you've said, it's what people have heard.
Yeah.
And so to try to phrase things in such a way that people can hear it.
Yep.
And when I try to talk to people about that, and I don't do it now, but they would say, well, that's being dishonest. And I said, no, I said, think about if you're traveling and you really have to go to the bathroom. Do you stubbornly sit there and say, well, I speak English and you should understand me? Or do you try to do whatever you can that the other person would understand and show you the door to the bathroom?
Well, and some people have said, you know, that they don't like the Enneagram because it puts people in a box. But what I've heard said is that we're in a box and this is the key to get out. And so I'll give you an example of, not at Salem Montessori, but at another school I worked with a colleague. And I lead with a type that's actually pretty fear-based. It doesn't always come out, but I'm sort of checking out and wanting to create support and wanting a lot of stability around me. And she leads with, I have to finish first. I have to achieve. I have to be the best. So every time I'd walk in her office, it was, let me tell you all the things you haven't done them fast enough, or it wasn't right. And once we had the Enneagram, I would walk in and say, I need 2 sentences of support before you tell me 3 things that haven't been delivered on your time, you know, right. And it totally, what you're saying, Betsy, it wasn't personal anymore. We are so focused on ourselves at every age. Half of what happens to me isn't about me, it's about the other person. And we all have little blind spots, right? Like, I don't necessarily think that I'm being abrupt sometimes when I'm just in a hurry, and that might be a blind spot for me. And so when someone can bring a blind spot to our attention, and that the Enneagram will do that, you relax and realize, oh wait, I'm not just doing this to be difficult or to I wasn't trying to be this way, but it does give you the opportunity for what I call a holy pause. And in that pause, we get some choice about how we're going to respond versus react. Another just quick example to go back to the Drakes. I have a son who's in the Navy. And I think Fran and I have talked about him. And he is obviously very driven. He went to the Naval Academy. And now he's a nuclear submarine officer. So, you know, I'm like, how did this happen in my family? But anyway, it did. I mean, we don't know anything about the military. We don't know anything about nuclear power. But it's very, very, very stressful. And the military is designed to be stressful so that if you're out on the nuclear sub and something's going wrong, you know, so he's in dock right now. And he's an achiever. And it's been really, really hard for him because he feels like he's failing. Because the number 3, that achiever, wants to achieve and do well and be successful. And a lot of CEOs are 3s and they're getting ahead. And, you know, he's just under so much gathering of information and so new that he can't do that right now. So my point is, it's helped me connect with my adult son in what's a hard time for him. And if I was just saying, I bet you're having a hard time, he doesn't want to hear that from his mother. But if I say, approach him and say, is this kind of how this is making you feel? You know, I know you're a 3 on the Enneagram. Then he opens up and talks. And so I like it as a tool for kind of opening up and getting people to share. You know, whereas if I go up to Susan Elster, who I haven't seen, unfortunately, during the pandemic, and say, Susan, how are you? She's going to be like, I mean, I'm fine, or I'm this, or Jack's doing this, or out, you know, whatever. But if I know her a little better and I know her number, if I ask her a question, it's going to change the conversation. And I'm not saying you want to have that kind of conversation with every single person you go to coffee with, but I think especially in a church and with some of the work and the things that you all are trying to take on, you do want to build connection. And I think sometimes that desire is just, you know, hard to come by. I'm going to show you one more slide.
Julie, I have a question.
Okay.
I'm wondering how are we affected by our social and economic situation? As I look at the group here, I think we're somewhat genius. And I'm wondering, I am much the elder here and grew up in different era, actually. So I'm wondering, how does this play into the picture of where we come from and what kind of setting we grew up in?
So that's actually a great question.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's a little bit, I get the gist. So the question is sort of, how does where we came from, both geographically, socioeconomically, racially, culturally, how does that affect our view of the Enneagram, and also probably what we land on as leading with? Okay. So there's something really interesting when I was in San Francisco. You know, a long, long time ago when we used to jump on a plane and go places. I went to San Francisco for a week last summer and did a double intensive. And there's something called the Enneagram Prison Project, which intrigues me. And they are using the Enneagram to help prisoners, people that are incarcerated. And we're not talking misdemeanors. It was pretty intense. And they were attending the workshop in San Francisco. And so it allowed me to see people from very different backgrounds from my own and hear them narrate. And I think, to your point, Fran, it's designed to be a tool for the healthy. So if you're committing crimes and you're not healthy, or you're living in an abusive situation, it might not be the first perfect tool for you, because that's a caveat, right? I mean, you might need more Betsy's expertise if you really need psychotherapy. But the people that had been in prison were very eloquent with how it had helped them see their patterns and their past. And so certainly the blend of the culture of the family and the country and the circumstances you grew up in blend together, that whole nature versus nurture, which we're not going to solve that ever. And we're certainly not going to do it today. But as you understand your number, you're going to see how pieces of your childhood and your relationship with your parents and your siblings relate to where you find yourself moving in the circle. The other thing I will say is that a lot of people believe cultures and cities identify as numbers. So America is a pretty 3, the achiever. That's what I'm saying we believe my son to be. You know, get ahead, work hard, you get what you pay for, effort equals success. That's pretty American. So I think we all know not every culture has that so strongly as we do, right? That's pretty American. The other thing is I like to play a little game. So I grew up in New Orleans. And when I moved up to Charlotte with my husband in the early 80s, I felt like I was in another country. And so one way I describe it is New Orleans leads kind of with, let's have fun. Let's not worry about the problems. There's a hurricane coming. That happens all the time. The whole city floods. They make fun of it all. I mean, it's got a soul to it of sort of looking for the next dopamine burst and feeling, you know, joy and fun and sort of the city that care forgot. Well, that was actually not the culture in Charlotte, North Carolina, when I arrived there in 1986. And people in Charlotte took some things very seriously that I never heard of. Like one thing I remember reading in the newspaper was a big discussion of whether some art represented Christian values. And I was like, what? Like, is that a thing? I mean, I never thought of art as needing to be in certain moral guidelines. I thought art was just self-expression. And so I think, Fran, that's a really interesting question and a great idea to play with. And it would just make my heart so happy if this tool were brought to people who maybe aren't as privileged, or, you know, with skill, brought to people that might actually have different living circumstances. And there's a pretty big push to try to bring it to a more diverse audience. But, you know, I think we all know that you can only bring what people want, right? So the first has to be desire. But like a lot of things, I've learned a lot about this from people. When I was in San Francisco, there were people from Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, prison. That was in the San Francisco area. There were people from Europe. There was a woman from New Zealand, and it was very interesting. The man from Pakistan didn't talk a lot, but when we asked him why he was here, he was doing it for a month. I can't imagine sitting in that room in San Francisco for a month. He took every level of class all right in a row. And I mean, a week was about enough for me. My ADD, I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to go rent a bike. I got to do something. But The gentleman from Pakistan said he saw the Enneagram as a tool for world peace, and that his intention was to bring it back to Pakistan and build community. So I think it's pretty powerful. I want to show you one more thing, and I want to be sensitive to your time. Let me just, this is kind of an interesting thought to leave you with if you've been mostly bored. Let's see, this. Focus of attention. If you don't do anything else this week, and I appreciate y'all sharing Suzanne Stabile's book. There's some others that I'll put up, whether you like books, I'll put up a couple podcasts. You don't have to do anything. You can just come back next week with the same set of questions. But an interesting thought this week will be, where does your attention go? Don't do anything to your attention, and don't be unkind, and don't chastise yourself, but just notice what you first see. We all have a lens that we use, and then notice that your energy follows.
This is a reminder.
And so that it will give you a lot of information about what your type might actually be. And so
take sign.
I'm not sure what that is. But your energy is going somewhere. Okay. And it might not actually always be the most productive place. So in my case, unfortunately, or fortunately, my energy often goes to worst case scenario. So that's useful at times, right? But it's probably not the best thing for me to be there all the time. And so if you sort of notice where your attention's, and that can also be pretty energy sapping. I mean, how fun is that, right? Like, there's another hurricane about to go to New Orleans, and my son is there, and my house is there, and my love is there, and I don't want that to happen. And it usually isn't Katrina, but you know, you could see how that would be not what I want to be thinking about today. But if you come back with that information next week, we're going to start with type 1, the perfectionist. And what I want to say is, I hope that this is compelling enough that you want to return. It doesn't hurt my feelings if you don't want to. It's very hard to be entertaining on Zoom for 45 minutes, so I apologize for all the talking. But we all have all 9 numbers. So I love what Ted said. When he read the number, he was like, that's me. And then he read another number and was, that's me. And guess what? Ted is completely right. We're not one thing. We all have pieces. So I call it, when I talk about the 1, the perfectionist, I am not a 1. My lines don't go to 1. I'm not next to 1. I'm not a 1. Okay. But I've worked with some 1s, and I think my husband has a 1 wing. So, but I describe it as the 1 in all of us. So we've all had times where we tried to be perfect, and when we didn't, our inner voice shamed ourselves and chastised us, and we couldn't turn off the I should have, right? Every single person has had that experience. We just don't go there first. There was a woman at one of the workshops. The way we do it when I'm trained is everyone already knows their number, and it's a panel. So all the 1s get up. Instead of me telling you about a 1, they narrate questions from the point of view of a 1. And she was telling us about, at her church, she was like in charge of the coffee hour, you know, when we had church and coffee and all that thing. She ordered the wrong coffee. And I was like, who cares? Just say I ordered the wrong coffee. You either drink this or drink water. It's fine. We're here to have Sunday school and talk about God. But no, she like couldn't let it go, was almost in tears, worried about it for a week. I mean, it almost sounded like obsessive compulsive disorder, but you get the point. Whereas that, you know, let me order the coffee, because if I order the wrong kind, I'm just going to say, sorry, I ordered the wrong kind, right? And so you could see how as a team, there might be roles to play where it doesn't always get at your core issue every single time. But I would also say you can't run from your core issues. So next week, we'll be talking about, what does it feel like to lead with, I need to be perfect? And, you know, you will recognize probably your spouse, your children, colleagues. You might notice church members. I don't recommend that you call up your church community members and say, I think you're a 1. That's why every time we're in a committee, you just keep stopping and wanting to fix it. And, you know, we never get anything done. And I've been taking this Enneagram, and let me solve your problems for you. Because it's compelling, you will see. But I think, you know, it for me has just given me information on why I keep doing the same things with the same result, and an opportunity to shift that. So I see we're a little bit over time, 4 minutes to be exact. I don't know what happens to me I mean, you can leave anytime, I guess. Does anybody else have a parting thought or comment or something that might help me as I try to help you proceed through the next few weeks?
Julie,
Yeah, Lucy.
it's Debbie Drake.
Oh, it's Debbie. Okay.
When our 4 kids all had me pegged at the same number, all 4 of them.
Okay.
And Ted said the same thing. But there was I don't know if it came out of this book or our son gave it to us. There was a little online quiz that you could take, one that is free and one that you pay for. And I haven't read enough of the book yet. I took the free one, and the free one did not label me as what everyone else had labeled me, which is, again, supporting what you're saying, that sometimes what we're feeling on the inside is not what we're projecting.
Right.
Although I do think what they've labeled me as is pretty close. But do you know anything about those tests or whether
yeah. So I have that in my notes, but I sort of went off on a tangent, just trying to look at y'all at the screen. Yes, I do know about the tests. And here's what I would say. The goal of the Enneagram is inner knowing. So there are tests. I'm going to put up the best test. I'll give it to Margaret. The best test is reading 9 paragraphs and ranking them in order, right? I know there are several multiple choice. That one, my hope would be that if I put up the paragraphs that you can come back next week thinking there are 2 or 3 numbers that resonated. So, you would rank them in order. So like for me, 1 would probably be at the bottom. Like I am not a perfectionist. I live in the world of it's good enough, right? So I wouldn't be thinking I might be a 1. But if you can come in with thinking between 2 or 3 numbers, I think reading the paragraphs is good. The problem with multiple choice is it's a little bit of an algorithm.
Right.
But your children and your spouse, I would suggest, I assume your children are not 5 years old. I think they're, that's pretty significant, but it's inner knowing. And only you can say that. So many people think I'm more achievement oriented than I actually am. And it's just that I can talk a lot, but underneath it's not as strong as it sounds. So, I get mistyped, and we'll talk about, there are a lot of common mistypes. And when we get you around the wheel, we'll show you that. So I'll put up the paragraph test. Have fun, do whatever you want. There's a million free tests, and feel free to take them if that's fun for you. The way I'm like to do it, I don't know if I can pull it off, but this summer when I taught, I had a representative of each number at each class, and I had them narrate, what's it like to be a 1, or what's it like to be a 5? And that person would answer some questions. I'm not sure that I have a representative from each number, but I may try. And if any of you all know your numbers, if you want to share those with Margaret and you're willing for me to ask you a few questions in the class, that is more helpful, right? Because you get a really, and the more I type people and coach and listen, it's so you hear certain words from certain types and certain body language and things. It's endlessly fascinating. So thank you for that question. I'll also put up, there's a local person, Chris Copeland, who has a podcast that's about 20 minutes, and you can listen to different types on his podcast. And that's another way if you're the podcast type. So any other things like that might help me move us forward next week? Yeah, Betsy, do you want to say something?
Can I just get clarification? Are you sending things to Margaret, and then is she going to email them to us?
I think that's the best, because I don't know how to get them directly to you, and I think putting them up in chat and all is super frustrating, and then you can't find them again. So I'll get her some books. I have a whole resource list. I'll send it to her, and in that I'll have her put my email, and you're welcome to email me if you want something specific that's not there. I'm kind of living in the world of more information in my head than is actually probably helpful or necessary for any of us, but I'm happy to share.
Does Margaret need anything from us? Does she want us to send her an email, or does she have everything?
Okay, Andrew Heil put you in this room, so you must have signed up for this class in some way.
No, we just clicked and he said, where do you want to be? And we went.
Oh, well, I will work on that. I think it's doable. I actually know a few of you. I know Nat Watson's daughter super well. So I think you just joined us back, but I also know that the Watsons know a whole lot about the Enneagram. So he might not.
Which one?
Huh? Yeah, I know y'all know a lot about the Enneagram in your family.
Which daughter do you know?
Emmy,
Okay.
right? I hired her twice. Once at Summit and once took her away from Summit to Salem Montessori. So I don't know if I'm good or evil, but she's happy, so I guess I'm good.
Julie, it is wonderful to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too. I've heard a lot about you.
And me,
So,
you.
yep, that's the Julie. I like to do this with teachers, but you don't always in a workplace have the time. So thanks, Betsy, for that question. And I will work diligently on that to try to figure out. And then next week, maybe if you're not getting it, you can put your email in the chat and somebody can figure that out. But if you really want to find me, it's pretty easy on the Salem Montessori website. And, you can certainly just send me a personal email. I mean, I have like a whole Google Doc. It's not like I have to create this. I can, if you're not getting what you want, if you look at the website, it's so hard to get in touch with the school right now that I just put my own email up there because I don't want any new people at the school, honestly, right now. My hands are full. So, well, thank you all for coming. I think this is going to be delightful, and I'm glad to see some faces I don't know and reconnect with some faces I do know. And if someone didn't join this week, I think, this is kind of like a warm up. So anybody's welcome to join anytime. You're welcome to quit anytime. You can come in and out. That's just how life works. So thanks for your attention. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Julie.
All right. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.